In the far north of Krasnoyarsk Krai, beyond the rivers and winter roads, there are Soviet stations that still officially exist on paper. Most of them were built during the 70s and 80s. Weather stations. Radio outposts. Polar research facilities scattered across empty Arctic coastline where almost nobody lives anymore. Some were abandoned after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Others simply stopped answering transmissions one winter and were quietly forgotten. Station S9 was one of them. Official records claimed the station suffered an electrical fire during January of 1987. 3 personnel were listed as dead. 2 bodies were never recovered because of severe storm conditions during evacuation. After that, the station was permanently closed. At least officially. But in February of 2024, radio hobbyists near Norilsk began reporting strange activity on an old Soviet shortwave frequency that had remained silent for decades. At first, most people assumed it was interference. The Arctic atmosphere does strange things to radio signals during winter. Frequencies travel farther. Old military channels sometimes bleed into civilian bands. Voices from thousands of kilometers away can suddenly appear through static late at night. But this transmission was different. Because the signal identified itself. S9 weather station requesting response. The same message repeated every night at exactly 1:17 a.m. Always in Russian. Always distorted by heavy static. And always followed by several seconds of metallic noise that nobody could explain. The recording spread quickly through radio forums online. Most listeners believed it was either a prank or some old automated beacon hidden somewhere along the Arctic coast. Then the second transmission appeared. A man's voice this time. Weak. Exhausted. There is movement outside the station. After that recording, interest in S9 changed immediately. Because several former Soviet meteorologists recognized the station code. And according to archived infrastructure maps, S9 should not have had working electricity for nearly 40 years. The story eventually reached Anton Lebedev. Anton was 34 years old and worked repairing communication equipment for remote industrial stations across northern Siberia. Most of his contracts involved damaged satellite systems, frozen relay towers, or emergency radio replacements at isolated mining settlements. He spent most of his life traveling alone. And after enough years in the north, isolation starts changing people. You become comfortable with silence. Comfortable with endless snow. Comfortable with hearing the wind push against metal walls at 3 in the morning while the nearest human being sleeps hundreds of kilometers away. Anton actually preferred it that way. Which was probably why he accepted the S9 contract when everyone else refused. Officially, the job sounded simple. A private geological company operating near the Kara Sea wanted confirmation that the old station was truly abandoned before constructing a new relay tower nearby. Recent radio activity created legal problems because Soviet emergency infrastructure technically remained protected property under several old Arctic regulations. So Anton was sent north to inspect the station. Take photographs. Confirm abandonment. Leave. The helicopter dropped him nearly 12 kilometers from S9 because worsening weather made direct landing impossible. The pilot never shut off the engine during unloading. That bothered Anton immediately. "You're not staying?" he asked over the rotor noise. The pilot shook his head. "Storm's getting worse. It'll be worse tomorrow." The pilot looked toward the white horizon surrounding them. Then he lowered his voice slightly. "Listen carefully." If the station radio starts working, he hesitated. Almost embarrassed. "Don't answer it after midnight." Anton stared at him for several seconds. The pilot forced a tired smile like he regretted saying anything at all. Then the helicopter lifted back into the storm and disappeared into Arctic fog. Silence returned almost instantly. Endless Arctic silence. Anton adjusted the heavy pack on his shoulders and looked north toward the frozen coastline. At first he saw nothing except snow and darkness. Then the storm shifted briefly. And far away across the white emptiness, he finally saw the station. A black structure standing alone beside the frozen sea. One red antenna light blinking slowly above it through the storm. Like something still alive. The walk to SE9 took nearly 3 hours. By the time Anton reached the station, the last traces of daylight had disappeared behind the Arctic storm. Polar night had already settled across the coastline weeks earlier, but there is still a difference between darkness and northern darkness. Normal darkness feels temporary. Arctic darkness feels permanent. The station emerged slowly through blowing snow as Anton crossed the final stretch of frozen coastline. The structure was larger than he expected. 2 main buildings connected by enclosed metal corridors. A radio tower rising above them like a black needle against the storm. Half-buried fuel drums scattered beneath snowbanks near the outer fence. The entire complex looked dead. No exterior lights. No smoke. No generator noise. Only wind moving through rusted antenna wires high above the station. Anton climbed the frozen entrance steps carefully. Ice covered most of the steel door, forcing him to use both hands to pull it open. The smell inside stopped him immediately. Cold metal. Dust. Old smoke. And beneath it all something damp and rotten hidden deep inside the walls. His flashlight beam swept slowly through the entrance corridor. Soviet emergency posters still hung crookedly beside the lockers. Frost-covered sections of the ceiling where moisture had frozen years earlier. One of the fluorescent lights overhead swung gently even though there was no visible airflow. Anton stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The wind disappeared instantly. Now the silence felt even worse. The station interior seemed frozen in time. Coffee mugs still sat inside the small kitchen beside stacks of yellowed paperwork. Winter coats hung near the sleeping quarters. A chessboard remained unfinished inside the recreation room, pieces still positioned mid-game beneath thick dust. People had left quickly here. Or never truly left at all. Anton unpacked his equipment near the communications room and checked the battery lantern. Good power. Satellite transmitter working. Portable heater functioning. Everything normal. Outside, the storm continued hammering the station walls with dry Arctic snow. The metal structure groaned softly every few minutes beneath the wind pressure, creating long hollow sounds through the corridors. Anton tried not to think about the pilot's warning. Don't answer it after midnight. The communications room sat near the center of the station beneath the radio tower itself. Most of the equipment looked ancient. Soviet transmitters. Shortwave consoles. Reel-to-reel recording systems covered beneath gray fabric sheets. But one detail immediately caught Anton's attention. The primary radio console still had power. A single green indicator light glowed faintly above the panel. Anton frowned. Impossible. He removed his gloves and checked the wiring manually. No active generator. No external supply. And yet the light remained on. Weak. Steady. As if the station itself still breathed somewhere beneath the walls. At 10:43 p.m., Anton finally located the old station logs inside a rusted filing cabinet near the operations desk. Most pages were damaged by moisture or age, but several entries from January 1987 remained readable. January 11th. Heavy ice accumulation on north antenna. Signal interference worsening after midnight. January 14th. Movement observed outside western perimeter during storm conditions. No tracks discovered in morning inspection. January 16th. Repeated transmissions received from abandoned frequency bands. Voices responding to station call signs no longer in operation. Then the final readable entry. January 17th. Do not open exterior doors during night hours. Anton stared at that sentence for a long time. No signature beneath it. No explanation. Only those words written harder than the rest, as if the person holding the pen had been shaking badly. The station suddenly creaked somewhere above him. A deep metallic groan rolled slowly through the ceiling. Anton looked up instinctively. Then came another sound. Footsteps. Soft. Somewhere inside the corridor beyond the communications room. Anton remained perfectly still. The sound stopped immediately. Probably ice movement, he told himself. Old buildings make noise constantly during extreme cold. Metal contracts. Pipes shift. Wind pressure travels strangely through empty corridors. Still, he reached for the flashlight again. The beam cut through the dark hallway outside. Nothing there. Only long corridors disappearing deeper into the station. The sleeping quarters stood open farther down the hall, their doors moving slightly whenever the wind pushed against the outer walls. Anton listened carefully. Silence again. Then the radio crackled behind him. He turned so fast the flashlight beam struck the ceiling. Static filled the communications room softly. Not loud. Not violent. Almost gentle. Anton slowly approached the console. The green indicator light still glowed. And now another light blinked beside it. Receiving signal. The static shifted briefly. Then a voice emerged through the interference. Male. Weak. S9 responding. Anton felt cold crawl slowly across the back of his neck. The transmission continued. Storm visibility near the coast is gone. Heavy static swallowed several words. Then. Something is walking near the antenna. Anton stared at the radio. The voice sounded old. Not elderly. Old recording old. Like audio trapped inside damaged tape. The transmission crackled again. Please respond. Then silence returned. Anton exhaled slowly and checked the timestamp on his recorder. 1:17 a.m. Exactly the same time mentioned in the online recordings. Outside, the Arctic wind screamed across the station harder now. And somewhere above the ceiling something heavy moved across the roof. Anton remained awake for the rest of the night. Not because of fear at first. Because of logic. There had to be an explanation for the transmission. Some forgotten emergency battery system still functioning beneath the station. An automated recording triggered by atmospheric conditions. Maybe even illegal operators using the abandoned frequency somewhere farther north along the coast. But none of those explanations accounted for the footsteps. Or the movement above the roof. By 3:40 a.m., the storm outside had weakened slightly. Wind still scraped across the station walls in long frozen waves, but the violent shaking from earlier had settled into a lower constant hum. Anton sat alone inside the communications room drinking instant coffee that tasted faintly of rusted metal. The portable heater beside him struggled against the cold leaking through the walls. Every few minutes the radio emitted soft bursts of static before falling silent again. He had stopped trying to ignore it. The station wanted to be heard. That thought disturbed him more than he liked to admit. Around 10 a.m., Anton decided to inspect the roof access. Mostly to calm himself. Movement sounds inside Arctic stations were common during winter. Ice accumulation could easily shift heavy exterior panels or antenna supports. Once the mind starts connecting random sounds to fear, isolation does the rest. At least that was what Anton kept telling himself while moving through the dark corridors. The flashlight beam passed slowly across faded Soviet warning signs and cracked wall paint. Sections of the floor had warped slightly from decades of frost damage. In several places, old water stains stretched across the ceiling like dark veins. The station felt less abandoned the deeper he walked. Not maintained. Occupied. Like someone had stepped away only moments earlier. He reached the ladder access near the northern storage section. Frost coated the metal rungs almost completely. Then Anton noticed the door. The roof hatch stood slightly open. Only a few centimeters. Cold Arctic wind slipped through the gap in slow whistles. Anton stopped moving immediately. He was certain the hatch had been sealed when he first checked the station layout earlier that night. Very slowly, he climbed the ladder. The wind grew louder with every step upward. At the top, Anton pushed the hatch open carefully and emerged onto the roof. Darkness. Endless white storm beyond the station lights. The radio tower rose above him through blowing snow, its red obstruction beacon blinking slowly against the Arctic sky. Flash. Darkness. Flash. The entire coastline stretched empty in every direction. Frozen sea. Ice fields. Snow dunes shaped by decades of wind. No movement anywhere. Anton scanned the roof carefully with the flashlight. That was when he saw the tracks. Footprints. Large. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too deep. Too narrow. The impressions crossed the snow-covered roof from the radio tower toward the hatch where Anton now stood. He crouched slowly beside one of them. The edges looked fresh. Very fresh. Snow had not filled them yet. Which meant something had walked there recently. Maybe minutes earlier. Anton followed the tracks with the flashlight beam. They ended beside the tower supports. No return tracks. Nothing leading away. Only empty snow surrounding the steel structure. The wind shifted suddenly across the roof. And Anton heard breathing. Not behind him. Above him. He slowly raised the flashlight. Something stood near the upper antenna platform almost 30 feet overhead. Tall figure. Motionless. The storm concealed most of its shape behind moving snow, but Anton could still make out long pale arms wrapped around the tower framework. Watching him. The flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. The figure did not move. Did not climb. Did not react to the light. It simply remained attached to the tower like frozen ice hanging from steel. Then the radio transmission started again. Not from inside the station this time. From somewhere above the roof. Static burst across the tower speakers overhead. Then the same exhausted male voice echoed through the storm. Don't let it inside. The figure moved instantly. Not downward. Sideways. Too fast. Anton barely understood what he was seeing. 1 second the pale shape clung to the upper tower platform. The next second it disappeared behind the steel supports with impossible speed. The tower speakers crackled violently again. It waits during storms. Anton backed toward the hatch immediately. The flashlight beam swept widely across the roof. Nothing there now. Only snow. Only the blinking red tower light. Then another sound drifted through the wind. Metal scraping slowly across the roof behind him. Closer. Anton turned. A long frost-covered maintenance hook near the ventilation units was moving by itself across the snow. Dragging slowly toward him. The metal tool stopped. Then moved again. Pulled by something hidden beneath the darkness beside the roof vents. Anton finally ran. He nearly slipped climbing through the hatch back into the station. The heavy door slammed shut above him while Arctic wind howled across the roof outside. For several seconds he remained frozen on the ladder, listening. Silence. Then came 3 slow knocks from above the hatch. Clang. 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 Anton stared upward without breathing. The radio somewhere deeper inside the station crackled softly again. And through the static, another voice whispered. It's looking for an open door. By morning, Anton had almost convinced himself he was losing perspective. Lack of sleep. Isolation. Extreme cold. Too many hours alone inside a dead Soviet station surrounded by endless darkness. The human brain was not built for places like this. Polar researchers wrote about it constantly. Auditory hallucinations. Paranoia. distorted sense of time. And yet the footprints on the roof had been real. Anton knew that. At 9:12 a.m., he used the satellite transmitter to contact the geological company base near Dudinka. The connection quality was terrible. Wind interference kept swallowing parts of the transmission, but eventually someone answered. Lebedev, report. Anton glanced toward the communications room before responding. Station structure is intact. Some electrical anomalies inside. Possibly residual battery systems. Static crackled loudly through the line. Then the operator asked, any sign the station is occupied? Anton hesitated. No. The answer came too quickly. Even he heard it. Another burst of interference swallowed the line for several seconds. Then the operator returned, sounding distracted now. Finish inspection before tonight's storm cycle. What storm cycle? Silence. Only static. Then. You didn't read the old weather reports? The transmission distorted again before Anton could answer. Storms repeat every 3 nights, more static. If visibility drops after midnight, stay away from the outer doors. The line died completely. Anton lowered the transmitter slowly. That phrase again. Outer doors. Not leave the station. Not go outside. Stay away from the doors. As if something specifically wanted entry. The Arctic daylight outside barely existed. Even at noon the world beyond the station windows looked like endless dark blue twilight beneath heavy clouds. Snow moved constantly across the coastline in thin ghostly layers, erasing shapes almost as soon as they appeared. Anton spent most of the afternoon documenting the station interior. Sleeping quarters. Storage rooms. Generator systems. Old weather equipment frozen beneath dust and corrosion. The deeper sections of IS-9 disturbed him most. Especially the lower maintenance corridors beneath the station. According to old blueprints, Soviet engineers built a heated utility level under the main structure to protect water lines and communication cables from Arctic frost. Narrow service tunnels connected the fuel storage, generators, and antenna systems below ground. Most of those tunnels should have been flooded or frozen solid decades earlier. But when Anton forced open the lower hatch near the generator room, warm air drifted upward from the darkness below. Not hot, but warmer than the station itself. That made no sense. Anton descended carefully into the underground corridor with the flashlight raised. The smell hit immediately. Wet metal. Rust. And seawater. The tunnel walls sweated with condensation despite the Arctic temperatures outside. Thick pipes ran along the ceiling beside old communication cables wrapped in cracked insulation. Somewhere deeper below the station, water dripped steadily through darkness. The flashlight beam revealed something else too. Fresh moisture on the floor. Not puddles. Footprints. Long wet footprints leading farther into the tunnel system. Anton stopped walking. The prints looked barefoot. Human-shaped, but unnaturally stretched, as if the feet themselves had been pulled longer somehow. He followed them anyway. Partly because of fear. Partly because turning back now somehow felt worse. The tunnel descended deeper beneath the station. Old emergency bulbs lined the ceiling every 20 meters, though none should have had power anymore. And yet one of them flickered faintly ahead. Then another. Then another farther down. Anton's breathing slowed. The lights were turning on one by one as he approached. Waiting for him. The tunnel finally opened into a larger maintenance chamber beneath the radio tower foundation. Ancient generator systems stood silent along the walls beneath layers of frost and rust. Except one machine was still running. Weakly. A low electrical hum vibrated through the chamber floor. Anton stared in disbelief. An old Soviet emergency generator still operated in the darkness beneath IS-9. Impossible. No fuel system could survive this long. No machine should still function after nearly 40 years beneath Arctic ice. Then he noticed the cables. Fresh cables. Modern wiring connected the generator directly into the communication systems above. Someone had repaired it. Recently. The realization made Anton turn slowly toward the darkness beyond the chamber. Something moved there. A shape disappearing between the support columns deeper underground. Tall. Thin. Too pale against the darkness. Anton raised the flashlight immediately. Who's there? No answer. Only dripping water. Then came a voice from the radio speaker mounted beside the generator. Soft static first. Then. We sealed the lower door, a different man than before. Older. Breathing hard. But it kept scratching from the ice. The transmission crackled violently. Mikhail opened it during the storm. Long silence followed. Then the final sentence emerged through heavy interference. There was seawater inside the corridor. After that, Anton backed away slowly from the generator. Because he suddenly realized something horrifying. The maintenance chamber floor was wet. Not with condensation. With seawater. And beneath the low electrical hum of the generator he could hear slow movement inside the walls. Anton left the maintenance chamber faster than he wanted to admit. The flashlight beam shook slightly in his hand while he moved back through the underground tunnel beneath S9. Water dripped steadily somewhere inside the walls, echoing through the narrow corridors with unnatural clarity. Behind him, the old generator continued humming in the darkness. Alive! That was the part Anton could not stop thinking about. Not functioning. Alive! The station no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied by something patient. Something hidden beneath the ice. By the time Anton climbed back into the upper levels of S9, the Arctic storm outside had returned. Wind slammed against the station walls hard enough to rattle the metal corridors. Snow struck the windows in frozen waves that briefly erased the outside world completely. The red tower light blinked slowly through the storm beyond the glass. Flash! Darkness! Flash! Anton checked the time. 11:48 p.m. Nearly midnight. The radio remained silent for now, but the entire station seemed tense somehow, like old metal waiting for pressure to break it apart. Anton sealed the lower hatch behind him using a rusted maintenance bar he found near storage. He was not entirely sure why. Instinct, maybe. Then he returned to the communications room and spread the surviving station documents across the operations desk. Most were damaged beyond readability, but several emergency reports from January 1987 contained repeated references to something called the lower door. Not a maintenance hatch. Not an exterior exit. Just lower door secured. Lower door inspection delayed. Movement heard beyond lower door. Anton found no matching structure on the station blueprints. Which meant either the records were incomplete or someone intentionally removed part of them. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the station lights flickered. Anton froze immediately. SR9 had no active electrical grid. And yet pale fluorescent light suddenly flowed weakly through the ceiling fixtures above him. One by one, the corridors outside began glowing dimly blue beneath decades of dust. The radio activated at the same moment. Static flooded the communications room violently. Then came screaming. Not one voice. Several. Men shouting over alarm somewhere inside the station. Seal it now, the ice is breaking close. The lower corridor, the transmission distorted beneath deafening interference. Then Anton heard another sound mixed into the recording. Scratching. Slow scratching, metal against metal. The screaming stopped abruptly. But the scratching continued. Steady. Patient. From somewhere underground. Anton stared toward the floor. The scratching was not coming through the radio anymore. It was inside the station. The sound moved slowly beneath the walls below him. Dragging. Searching. Anton backed away from the operations desk. The scratching stopped instantly. Silence swallowed the station again. Then came 3 heavy knocks from beneath the floor. Boom. 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 The entire room vibrated softly. Anton's mouth went dry. Something was directly below the communications room. And then the station speakers turned on. Every speaker. All at once. A calm male voice echoed through the corridors of SL9. Exterior door open. Anton looked toward the hallway immediately. The main entrance. He never touched it. The station speaker crackled again. Exterior door open. Cold air suddenly moved through the corridor outside. Not imagined. Real. Anton grabbed the flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The corridor lights flickered weakly overhead while Arctic wind whispered somewhere deeper inside the station. The main entrance stood partially open. Snow drifted slowly across the floor beneath it. Anton stared in disbelief. He clearly remembered sealing that door hours earlier. Very slowly, he approached. The storm outside screamed beyond the entrance, but Anton could see something else now through the moving snow. Footprints. Fresh wet footprints leading from the coastline toward the station. Bare human footprints. Long. Distorted. The tracks disappeared directly into the darkness inside SL9. Anton shut the door immediately and forced the locking wheel closed with both hands. The metal groaned loudly. Then the station speakers crackled again. This time the voice sounded different. Closer. Female. There's someone outside. Anton spun toward the nearest speaker mounted above the corridor. Static hissed softly behind the voice. Then came a gentle knock from the exterior door. 3 slow taps. Anton stopped breathing. Another knock followed. Then another. The female voice returned through the speakers. Please let me inside. The voice sounded normal. Cold. Exhausted. Human. But Anton finally understood the terrifying pattern hidden inside all the recordings. Everything at SL9 imitated distress first. The station logs. The voices. The transmissions. The scratching beneath the floor. Always asking for help. Always asking for entry. Another soft knock came from the entrance. Then silence. Anton remained motionless in the corridor for nearly a full minute. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. Finally, very slowly, he stepped backward away from the door. That was when the scratching returned beneath the floor. Except now it sounded directly underneath him. And something wet touched the underside of the metal grate near his boots. Anton lowered the flashlight carefully. Dark seawater was slowly rising through the floor vents. Then a pale hand emerged from the black water beneath the grate. Human hand. Long frozen fingers gripping the metal from below. And somewhere deep under the station someone began climbing upward through the walls. Anton stumbled backward so fast he nearly fell against the corridor wall. The pale hand beneath the floor grate remained motionless for several seconds, its frozen fingers wrapped tightly around the metal bars while black seawater spread slowly across the corridor floor. Then the fingers moved. Not naturally. Too slowly. Like something remembering how human movement was supposed to look. Anton raised the flashlight with shaking hands. The beam illuminated skin stretched tight and pale beneath layers of frost. The hand looked waterlogged, swollen by years beneath freezing saltwater. And it was still climbing upward. The corridor speakers crackled violently again. Static burst through the station. Then came the same exhausted female voice from before. Please don't lock the door. Anton ran. Pure instinct took over completely now. He moved through the dim corridors of SL9 while the station lights flickered overhead in weak pulses. Behind him, metal groaned somewhere inside the walls. Pipes vibrated. Water rushed through unseen spaces beneath the floors. The entire station sounded awake. He reached the communications room and immediately grabbed the satellite transmitter from the operations desk. The small emergency screen flickered weakly as he forced the connection open. Nothing. Only interference. Outside, the Arctic storm hammered the station harder than ever now. Snow covered the windows completely between bursts of wind, sealing the building inside moving white darkness. Then the radio activated by itself again. Not static this time. A recording. Old Soviet emergency audio flooded the room through damaged speakers. Lower corridor breached repeat, seawater entering maintenance level, men shouting somewhere in the background. Then another voice emerged clearly above the chaos. We lost Mikhail near the outer ice. The recording distorted briefly. He came back 3 hours later. Anton stared at the radio without breathing. The transmission continued. Do not let him inside. A violent burst of interference cut across the station. Then silence. Complete silence. Even the storm outside seemed quieter suddenly. Anton slowly turned toward the corridor. Darkness waited there beyond the communications room. The corridor lights had gone out completely. Only the red tower beacon flashed through distant windows now. Flash! Darkness! Flash! And during one of those red flashes, Anton saw someone standing at the far end of the hallway. A man wearing an old Soviet winter coat. Motionless. Water dripping steadily onto the floor beneath him. Anton could not see the face clearly. But the proportions were wrong. The arms too long. The posture slightly bent, like joints assembled incorrectly. Another red flash illuminated the corridor. Now the figure stood closer. No footsteps. No sound. Just suddenly nearer. Anton backed away slowly until his legs struck the operations desk behind him. The figure continued staring. Then it spoke using a wet, broken voice that sounded torn apart by seawater. Open the lower door. Anton finally understood what had happened at S9. Something had come from beneath the Arctic ice during the storms. Something the station crew initially mistook for a survivor. And once they allowed it inside, the station never truly closed again. The figure in the hallway twitched violently. Its head tilted too far sideways. Then the corridor speakers all activated at once. Every voice Anton had heard during the past 2 days erupted together through the station. Men screaming. Radio operators crying for help. Weather reports. Emergency warnings. Fragments of old conversations trapped endlessly inside the walls of S9. And beneath all of them one repeating sentence. It learns your voice. The figure suddenly moved. Anton barely reacted in time before it crossed half the corridor with horrifying speed. Its soaked body struck the communications room doorway hard enough to bend the metal frame inward. Anton grabbed the emergency flare gun from his equipment case and fired instinctively. The flare exploded against the creature's chest in blinding red light. For one terrible second Anton saw it clearly. Not a person. Several frozen bodies fused together beneath layers of ice and seawater. Human faces half visible beneath stretched pale skin. Arms joined incorrectly along the torso. Empty mouths opening and closing while seawater poured endlessly from inside them. The creature recoiled violently from the burning flare. Anton ran for the exterior exit. The station alarms suddenly activated overhead, flooding the corridors with red emergency light while Soviet evacuation messages echoed through the speakers. Outside door breach detected. Outside door breach detected. Snow blasted into the station as Anton forced the main entrance open and stumbled into the Arctic storm. The cold hit like a physical weapon. Wind erased visibility almost instantly beyond the station floodlights. Anton could barely see the coastline while fighting through knee-deep snow toward the emergency beacon tower near the landing zone. Behind him, S9 stood glowing dim red beneath the storm. And figures now moved behind the station windows. Dozens of them. Watching. The helicopter beacon tower emerged through the snow ahead. Then Anton heard the station door open behind him. Not slam. Not crash. Open slowly. Patiently. He did not look back. The emergency flare still burned weakly in his hand while he reached the outer radio mast beside the coastline. Wind screamed through the steel supports high overhead, creating long metallic cries across the frozen sea. Then Anton noticed something beneath the ice. Shapes. Human shapes moving slowly under the frozen water along the shoreline below the station. Walking beneath the ice toward land. Toward S9. Toward him. The storm swallowed everything moments later. Anton was officially recovered 36 hours afterward by an emergency aviation crew responding to his damaged beacon signal near the Kara Sea coast. According to the rescue report, he was found alone beside the outer radio mast suffering from severe hypothermia and temporary memory loss. No other personnel were discovered. No active generator existed beneath S9. And the lower maintenance corridors beneath the station had supposedly collapsed into the sea decades earlier. The station was demolished during summer of 2025. At least that was the official report. But radio operators across northern Siberia still report strange transmissions on abandoned Soviet frequencies during Arctic storms. Always after midnight. Always distorted by heavy static. And sometimes, beneath the interference, a calm voice still repeats the same warning from S9. Do not open the door during the storm.